Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. I'm Keaton Shaw. Thank you very much for joining me for this edition of the program. I've got on a bit of different attire this morning because of my first guest. This year saw another edition of the Band of the Year, a series of carnival murals by local artist Donald Jackie Hinkson. Since 2021, Hinkson has used the walls of Fisher Avenue in St. Anne's to display his huge pieces of art to the general public. Mr. Hinkson is with me in studio this morning. Hello, sir. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
It gives me great pleasure to have this conversation, so thank you for coming in. Let me ask, this idea for the Band of the Year series, this year's theme, as sailing with the ship, where did this idea stem from?
Well, I guess it's an extension of what I had done and shown before. If I may go back to some 15 years ago, when I produced the first mural of that scale, it's about 110 feet long. Somewhere halfway through that mural, the tone of it changed a bit to social commentary, social observation, and so on. And as a result of that, I got the idea to work in that mode further. And some 6 years ago, I began another one in which the focus was more on social commentary. When I produced that first one, I realized that what I was probably trying to do was to show what I think is a picture of life as a parade of carnival. You know, almost as though this is what we live in here is not real, you know, it's just a mass, it's an ongoing mass parade. And I got the idea then to call it Band of the Year.
Yes.
And what happened since then is that every year now I add to it. So it has no end. It's like an ongoing parade. And this year, or this past year, I decided I would call this section a sailing with the ship.
And that's the thing. A lot of your art speaks about social issues, locally and internationally. But it's unique, a sailing with the ship. In the context of Trinidad and Tobago, tell me about the themes that it encompasses a sailing with the ship.
I should add that in these murals I also have a little bit of fun, right? But what did occur to me is that I find myself often saying, look, regardless of how things might deteriorate, regardless of how terrible things might seem for all kinds of reasons, I am sticking here in Trinidad. So I'm sailing with the ship. And I leave it for the viewer to add, if they wish, the words from the Calypso, sink or float. But I'm not going to put that, because I don't want to be that pointed. I want to keep things a little nuanced, you know, suggest things and so on.
Why? Why do you want to keep it nuanced?
You mean the subtlety?
Yes, why?
Because for me, the purpose of art, and certainly the purpose of my art, is not to push any specific causes, not to get politically specific in any way. I'm reminded of some words that Derek Walcott used in an interview once when the person asked him, or when he was talking about art, because Derek was very, very good about art. He said, artists are known for their light, not for their causes. In other words, if the only thing that excites a viewer in my work is specific references to a political situation or social situation and so on, then as far as I'm concerned, that work has failed. What I want is that the visual elements in the work be compelling. How I control shape, tone, relationships, movement, rhythm, how I take the viewer's eyes through a rhythm throughout the work, and so on. If I don't do that aspect of the work successfully, then as far as I'm concerned, it's weak. Because anybody can have opinions. People write letters to the editor all the time, you know, expressing their specific opinion on this issue and that issue. That is not my aim. My aim is to look for something more permanent, more durable visually, even though somewhere in there there are messages, there are allusions to politics and social issues and so on.
I'm actually going to get back to the creative aspects in just one moment, but back to the theme, and that is as sailing with the ship. And this year you've used the exploration of headpieces of fancy sailor masks to refer to different situations. If you can just, in your eyes as the artist, link the old mass or the old culture to the current situations that the world, Trinidad and Tobago, is facing.
Yeah. Well, you know, art, painting and so on can be multi-layered. So in a work in which I have a traditional character like a sailor carrying a headpiece that alludes, let's say, to the war in Gaza or something like that, then I may be simultaneously be paying homage to a tradition in our carnival while making a commentary about a current, you know, troubling issue. So it was a, if you want, a clever way of combining visual with homage, with social and political observation on an international scale if necessary. So it was a way of interweaving these various elements.
You're quoted as saying it's one continuous look of life, like a band parading through the years. Does this also speak to your Hinkson that is put into these murals as well?
Well, I don't... You see, you have to understand that certainly I, as an artist, work largely in an intuitive way. I am not very conscious of exactly what I am doing, what I am saying. I allow my intuition to guide me. So, as you can see from the image there, I have the sailor characters with their headpieces, but I trust my intuition as to what kind of headpiece to make here, how big to make it, you know, what color to use. And you're right, what an artist produces is always a reflection of how he or she is responding to life, to his or her experiences, observations, locally and internationally. So I, like everyone else, am constantly responding, if only emotionally, to everything that I see around me in my society and in the world. So yes, I am in the work. My thoughts, my emotions, and hopefully they also represent to a large degree the experiences of the wider society.
Mr. Hinkson, a question that's a bit off topic, but focuses a bit more in depth into the stories. You said that you're not leaving Trinidad, you're staying, you're not going anywhere else, which is very it's not, I wouldn't say it's an interesting perspective, but it's unique in the sense that within recent times you're hearing more and more people saying, no, I'm that's it. I think I don't have anything else for Trinidad. Trinidad has nothing else for me.
Yes.
So, please tell me a bit more as to what Trinidad means to you.
Well, I suppose the experiences that leave the most permanent, deepest impressions, you know, on your mind and your memory and everything, is what you experience in your childhood and youth and so on. You know, and those experiences are indelible. There's no way that I could have gone through my youth here, what I did, how I played, how I worked, how I got on with my contemporaries, where I lived, the community I lived in, the family. Having gone through all of that, you know, the sheer respect that I feel for all of those experiences and for the country, for its landscape, for its seascape, for everything, I cannot abandon that for another culture, for another social environment. I cannot. But that's my decision. I fully accept that some other people, you know, can. I mean, I clearly remember when I returned here from university in 1970, it was the year of the Black Power movement. I remember people were leaving the country in droves to go and live in Canada and Australia and so on, just when I was returning home from university. I can't do it. I can't do it. Maybe my children can, but I can't do it.
No, it's unique, isn't it? As you are returning to your home, you're seeing people in large numbers leaving.
Yeah.
At no point in time did you feel disconnected? Have you ever felt disconnected?
No, not disconnected. I might look around me and see things that I don't like, but disconnected, no. I mean, there are things that remain permanent here. The quality of light, the landscape, you know, to mention just one small area, the certain capacity of people to create in a certain vivacious, you know, compelling kind of way. I was in a panyard last night, and this lady was doing an incredible dance in front of the band, you know, all by herself. She had not the audacity, she was compelled to do it, and it looked so great, you know. That kind of spontaneity, I don't think I would see that anywhere else. I don't think I would.
Before I get back to sailing with this ship, throughout the course of this interview, throughout the course of any interaction with you, you always seem so light, so happy. There's always some level of passion. What brings that out?
I'm not aware of that. That might be some kind of inherited genetic feature, you know, the tendency to laugh. My mother was a person who laughed constantly.
It's a good thing, by the way.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that inside I am happy. I'm not saying that I am or I'm not, you know. I'm just saying that tendency to want to laugh and smile and so on is, I think I inherited it in my genes from my mother. But you mentioned that one feature about my art and my painting and so on is a certain, I have seen, and other people have commented on it, is a certain quietness bordering on not a sadness. I don't know how to describe it. When I paint a landscape or a seascape, it never seems tonally and in its mood. It never seems to be as happy and jolly and as most other artists do. So
maybe you're not necessarily always painting with your eyes. You're more so letting your mind do
Yeah,
the
yeah,
movement.
yeah. As I said a little earlier, I live like you or anybody else, and you have experiences. You observe the life around you. You observe what is happening at all levels, leadership, everyday, neighborly, domestic, communal, community, and so on. And slowly, you form a vision about your society and about the world. What you try to do as an artist is to project that vision you have of human condition, if you wish, on canvas.
When you were
on
painting this, when you were painting this particular part of the mural, what is it that you were seeing or feeling?
All right, well, as I say, you look at that, any viewer looking at that work would say, my God, yes, he's talking about, he's alluding to the crime situation, the background building is the Royal Jail, and questions that are asked everywhere, who is next, police commenting on police brutality, and parents saying he was a good boy. So, on the surface, it seems to be quite an unpleasant subject. What I was trying to explain just now is that when I am painting that aspect of the work is in the back of my mind, in my subconscious somewhere. What I'm focusing on there is, where do I place that figure? What gesture do I give it? When should I change the color from yellow to green? How do I tilt the Republic Bank Visa card at a certain angle so it creates a continuous rhythmic movement across to the next one that says who is next, and so on? How do I do all of that? My focus is on those demanding technical questions about composition, bringing together. But I know that underneath in my subconscious, my mind is also on the content in the imagery and so on. So it's a complex process that I clearly, and I don't think anyone can fully explain in a logical way how the art process works, how complex, how layered it can be. I mean, at first glance, you've seen a lot of words, and one might think, well, words? I mean, why not images? Why words? But if I'm presenting words, note that I'm presenting them in a certain size, within a certain shape, using a certain color. So right away, I'm interweaving, what words say with visual elements of color, movement, rhythm, and so on.
Next photo, guys.
Yeah. This is a very good example of how I have meshed carnival characters and carnival incidents with social or political commentary. The idea of two bands clashing is an old one, dating back to the so-called Barjon days of carnival. So I have two bands here, one yellow, one red, and they're clashing, and the flag women are carrying their flags, one yellow, one red. So I'm trying to capture, if you want, the animation of bands clashing with the idea, with a political commentary about, the relationship between the two leading parties in the country. And to add atmosphere and to attract the viewer's attention, I have used in the background the Green Corner building, which was a famous corner where bands met, gathered, where people went, and so on. And on the right side of that image is one of those typically, what do I call it? Those publicities for things like fetes and parties and so on. And I said, this is on stage. But if you look carefully at the words, you'll see they all refer to some personality, you know. And it refers to an incident where some report was carried to the president, and soon after it was delivered to the president of the country, it was retrieved or withdrawn by a mysterious person.
So,
And these are the characters involved here, you know.
I liked how you've utilized traditional mass and a historical aspect of TNT, and to the right, the traditional form of advertising in TNT or commentary in TNT.
So I have, you know, I was constantly trying to, as I say, to interweave, you know, mass, traditional mass, with current issues, you know, that affect us. Here again, I've tied in a lot of things here. Many people won't remember, unless you're of a certain age, that Lucky Jordan was a famous rum shop bar in George Street, I think, where on every carnival Monday morning there was what was called a bomb competition, where steel bands would play a tune that was not part of the calypso scene. They would take a tune from international music, pop music and so on, and play it. And that would be called a bomb competition. But bomb, of course, has more than one meaning. Mm-hmm. So here I'm referring to the Russia-Ukraine war. And if you notice that the flag, the man carrying the flag who seems to be running out of the picture, is a Ukrainian flag.
Yes, yes.
And the name of the pan that he's holding, ODUS, is the word Exodus. So he is now escaping the Russian invasion, attack, and so on. One of the bands carries the pan, says invaders. The flag in the background says Red Army. So I'm constantly moving back and forth from mass, as we know it, to international issues. The headpieces on the military people, you know, a plane, a rocket, and things like that.
That is incredible. That is absolutely incredible.
All right, this is the beginning of the first big mural I did. And when I began it, I was interested in, as I say, paying tribute to early carnival and the history that you know, influenced it or that was taking place at the time. And I began with what looks like something like a barroquete on the far left, and the person on it is Queen Isabella of Spain, is in a barroquete. And next to her are these robber characters, and on their headpieces are the sails of Columbus's ships. So that way, I'm introducing carnival and history. And I go on to show some traditional characters against the backdrop of the type of architecture that you saw, that I saw as a child in the 1940s. You know, and then the Dame Lorraine and so on.
Yes.
And the thing evolves, you know, I continue, and the story and the narrative evolves like that. Now, I understand that a lot of viewers under the age of 50 wouldn't fully grasp what it, but it doesn't matter.
But you're also giving them the opportunity to experience what Trinidad was.
Or to tell some sort of story while alluding to, as I say, national and international issues, or realities. I mean, I suppose in a lot of these murals, I occasionally create a sense of chaos or rapidly moving something. So the tumbling movement of the rubber hats as it moves across the painting is supposed to take you through that kind of rhythm. Mm-hmm. And constant allusions, like KFC I allude to often, because it's such a powerful presence
Yes.
in our daily lives. You know, one headpiece has an oil rig, and the robber's cape is a $100 bill. I'm just trying to tie in things. The hat, the robber's hat on the left, 3 stumps that have been scattered, like when a cricketer gets bowled out, and it's hinting at the state of cricket in the West Indies, where we're in trouble. You know, wickets are falling, and then the QRC becomes a representative of the idea of education. The tower is leaning, and because it is widely believed that something is wrong with the education system and it needs to be fixed, and so on and so on. So I want to hint at all these ideas while creating a movement across the mural.
Let me ask you, Mr. Ingson, to describe, as you said, from what you would have seen growing up in the 1940s to now, the evolution of Carnival and TNT, and whether or not, in your opinion, we've lost the essence of what TNT's Carnival is about, or should be.
Yeah, it's tempting for a person of my age to say, yes, we've lost something and so on. But at the same time, I feel that Carnival and so on, or a large part of it, or parts of it, reflect what popular feelings there are. If in my youth, when there was a bigger gap between the middle and the lower classes, if the mass that came out of the lower classes had an element of, not fear, but resistance in them and so on, then to me that was just reflecting economic and social reality of the times. If in the ensuing decades things have changed with oil wells and so on, and that middle class has grown as a much bigger middle class and so on, then the need to show resistance is no longer there. And I'm simplifying things here. And that will be reflected in people's tastes. So I accept that if the majority of people just want fun, I accept that as a reality. You know, if within that there are pockets of more incisive commentary, then I accept that too. And I try to avoid being judgmental about how people should play, what kind of mass they should play. There's no way, the way calypsos were sung, the content and all of that, back in the 1950s, there's no way it's going to stay like that forever. It evolved into soca. You hear a lot of music now that is just pure rhythm and beat, but within that, there are also more nuanced, creations that tell us something about ourselves.
Is managing the visual aspect of it, and as you've described it so eloquently, the rhythm. How do I angle this? Where do I put an arm? Where do I place the leg? The lighting. It certainly is I wouldn't say it's difficult, but it certainly speaks very much to the mood or the emotions at that point in time.
Yeah.
When painting it, managing the. I think the rhythm, the visual elements is quite interesting, and that is why I'm curious to know, do you paint, do you sketch, whatever art it may be, what is attractive or what could be a long-standing message?
Certainly I don't automatically paint what is attractive. Sometimes I'm paying, as I say, I'm paying tribute. Let's say I want to pay tribute to our landscape. So I guess the word attractive can be used there. But at the same time, I'm also painting, as I say, what I feel about life. so I can inject my feelings about life and the human condition into that landscape and interpret it in a certain way. So as I say, you get 5 artists to paint the same landscape, you're going to get 5 different paintings, different emphases on emotions in different directions and so on. So I'm doing both. I'm doing both.
Your quote here is saying, I felt if I used carnival characters in a symbolic or metaphorical way to represent local and international situations, then it would make an interesting visual narrative. But in that same line, you went on to say, I am not a commentator. But you're presenting a visual narrative. So maybe it's not the words coming out your mouth, but you're still commentating on everything that you see. What do you see yourself as?
Well, that's why I tried to explain that the art process is a complex one, and it can be, and I think in my case it is multi-layered. So several things can be happening simultaneously in a work of art. Clearly, from these works, I am some sort of commentator. But at the same time, I want to inject some poetic mood into the work. And those are not necessarily contradictory. I mean, and as I try to say, it is a process that I and no one else, as far as I'm concerned, fully understand. It is so complex that I don't fully understand it. So I'm several things at the same time, it appears.
Well, Mr. Hinkson, as we're coming to the end of this interview, and as I've said, it gives me great pleasure. It is certainly a joy and an honor to have this conversation. What do you want people to gain from your work? What do you want them to experience or feel from your work?
Well, that's another very, very big question. I'm not sure. I am not sure. I just know that I am projecting my vision of life, of the world, of the human condition, and I'm showing it to you. I don't want to direct, a viewing public as to what they should feel or see. I leave that for them. And if, as I think, the work is multi-layered, it's natural to expect that different people will interpret the work in a different way, would put the emphasis on this or that or the other thing. So I don't want to tell people what to feel. I can just hope that somehow I have exposed to people some sort of reality about life. And that if they see it, and if I have done it in a compelling way, then I have contributed to, quality of life of people.
Mr. Hinkson, thank you so much, sir, for your time this morning.
It's such a complex thing that I hope I haven't confused you.
Not at all. Complexities are always a good thing. It keeps your mind running. It really expands your horizons. But I also think that it's quite intriguing and a good thing if even the artist at times cannot fully describe the piece in its entirety.
Yeah. Yep.
I think that's a very, very good thing.
It's not just good, it's inevitable.
Mr. Hinkson, thank you very much, sir. Have a good one.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, what a treasure of a conversation, what a treat of a conversation we have been privy to this morning. We're going to take a break here on AM Prime. I'm going to have a quick change of attire because I think the shirt is not doing me too much justice this morning, is it? Anyway, we'll be right back after this.
Like many others trying to save on Carnival, Gabby thought she should go for 50% off makeup.
What about the other side? Well, Daisy 50% off offer. So you know.
No makeup artist we don't know. What we do know is the savviest savings for Carnival are at KFC. Get a Chap Chap box, 1-piece chicken, 1 regular fries, and a biscuit for only $25.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have 2. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of this game.
no.
Let's go to the last part.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Welcome back to AM Prime, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much to Mr. Jackie Ingson for joining me on the program and for that extensive interview that we had this morning. As we continue with the Thursday edition of the program, I want to welcome my next guest. He is the author of the column, Increased Resources for Children Born into Chaos or Face Their Mounting Rage. And the column is most interesting. It delves into historical context of Trans-Tobago, various areas, and what they have faced or even what they feel. What have we seen and what is done? To speak more on it, I'm joined by Mr. Noble Phillip. He is a retired business executive, a journalist, columnist, and he's with me virtually this morning. Hello, sir. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well.
Well, thanks so much for joining. Let me start. The title of your column says Increasing Resources for Children Born into Chaos. Let's start by defining, in this particular instance, what you mean by chaos.
The lives that the children live is a life of chaos, meaning that from birth they are bombarded by factors that are outside of their control and factors which cause them to have a life that goes into what I would call uncontrolled existence. They are bombarded by crime in their neighborhoods. They're bombarded by schools that are not working. They're bombarded by families that are dysfunctional. And we can go on and list an entire list of items that are not conducive to raising a child who is whole and well.
Mm-hmm. You've focused a lot on various communities throughout Port of Spain and in environs, and you've said that such communities are symbolic of poverty-stricken communities. You've also mentioned that they remain invisible. Why do you suppose that is the case? I mean, if so many individuals throughout Trans-Tobago and so many activists have pointed out, in particular, these areas, why do you suppose they are deemed as invisible?
Well, they're invisible because when we wish past in our cars, we wet them with the water from the roads and the drains that are not well maintained, and we don't even stop to say sorry. You know, and when we have our conversations at the national level, nobody asks the woman from Manzilla or Chatham, what do you think about this? Because as far as we're concerned, she is not important, and she has nothing to say or to add to the conversations. So in a very real sense, they're invisible. And the point I made about the Laventel Beetham estate with the berm, as we call it, which was essentially a wall being built to block the drivers from seeing what's inside of the disaster area, that adds to the invisibility. You know, when we drive in our cars with our AC units on, we don't smell the filth that's on the road. So in many ways, we don't see because we don't want to see what is happening.
And you're arguing that the wall that was built, and if I'm not mistaken, it was for the Summit of the Americas and then the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. I think that was 2007, 2008, around there. In particular, just is a symbol of the ignorance these communities have faced.
Yeah. I mean, if we think about the case that really irritates me and saddens me, and I mentioned it in the version that you probably have read, the Alan Randiel case. A young child, the day before he went missing, was talking to Watson Duke, who was passing to collect votes. He lived in a freezer. Obviously, the freezer was not operational, but was put there by the government to help the fishermen of the area. So you provide a facility that is not maintained. People are living in it, literally in squalor. You talk about the problem because you want to score political points. And when the child goes missing, there's absolute silence from you. So don't come and tell me that some people are concerned and others are not. Tooth bagay, they are not concerned. All right, and that's the unreasonable position we have taken. And then when these children grow up traumatized, hurt, they come to lock your neck or they come to hold a gun to my chest. We wonder why they're so bad. They're not bad. We are the bad ones. That's the point I want to make.
Now, you just use that term traumatized. They may grow up traumatized. And at times it seems as though trauma is so casually accepted. Drawing reference to another example of that shooting, I think 2 years ago at the Rose Hill Primary School, the Minister of National Security stated that the children were not in danger as such, but it's the trauma associated with the event, and he was most casual about it. Is that something you're seeing too often, where we are just casually ignoring trauma and just allowing such to grow and grow within our society?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We do not believe in mental health. We do not believe in mental trauma. We do not believe that these things can affect generations and change the way we are growing as individuals. We just don't believe it because, again, it doesn't happen to us. Therefore, how could it be true? And that's the tragedy of our society. We are uncaring people who criticize those who are bearing the pain of our neglect and then expect them to give us a blight. It doesn't happen that way. Nowhere in the world.
It's interesting that you take that perspective, Mr. Phillip, because those who are critical make the argument that such individuals have chosen a life of violence. They speak the language of violence. And it's most interesting that you've taken this standpoint, because people will say, I criticize them because they could choose to do better or choose to do different.
Well, I hear that all the time. I also hear people who say, I lived in similar circumstances and look at me, I'm good. And the argument I raise all the time is that is not true. That's not true. When you lived in those circumstances, the conditions were different. And I'm not saying all, because you can point to Kareem Marcel in the BTM, who's a lawyer now. There are exceptions, but it's not generally the case. And that's the point I'm making. You know, when these children are resorting to violence in school because you haven't taught them how to express themselves, you haven't taught them how to deal with the lessons, so that you are frustrating the delights out of them in the classroom, and you're promoting them to even embarrass them more. What do you expect them to do? What do you expect them to do? That is the tragedy of our country. We keep promoting children who are not well-fed, who are not taught, who have all kinds of handicaps, and expect them to say, well, I pass for whatever school it is. But the reality is, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Sorry.
So let's now get to the solution of which you've mentioned, increasing resources. What resources in particular would you identify as necessary, or at this point crucial, for trying to deal with this situation and suppress the rage that these children are growing up with?
Well, we don't have to look very far. And I would admit from the very get-go that it is a complex problem, all right? But we don't have to look very far. In Jamaica, they ran an experiment, and I have to call it an experiment because they did not follow through with it, in which they took women from a particular deprived area. So just like how we have the BTM, they have certain areas just like that. And they took women from those areas, and they provided for them prenatal care, as well as childbirth, as well as early childhood education. And they proved that these children were able to succeed in life. So an initial resource I would like to see is, in fact, the caring of our women who are bearing children. And I know some people are going to say to me, well, they choose to bear children for a man who doesn't mind them. Yeah, but that's the next complex issue. So are we going to then say to them, forget about the child, forget about you, because of the circumstances of the conception? Then I would say in return, forget about you. Whatever you get, take. So we have to be very careful with the question of resources, because it's always as if we are beggaring the nation when we look after those who are less fortunate. I'll give you an example of the way I think about this stuff. You have a Down syndrome child. Should you not give a child more care than the child who is not suffering from that syndrome? Yet in Trinidad, the association that looks after Down syndrome children is starved of funds and resources. So I am not here arguing only for the children of the BTM or Bansilla or Sandy Grande. I'm arguing for the fact that what we need to do is sit down as a nation and say, okay, how can we provide more for our children so that we don't end up with damaged children who in turn damage in their rage the society in which we want to build.
Mr. Phillip, if you yourself have admitted that we have become such an uncaring, selfish population, is a conversation like that even possible?
Sadly, it is not possible, because those who make us invisible are the ones who would not have the conversation. On the other hand, about 2 weeks ago, I was in a conversation with some women and 3 men. There were 10 of us, and we were discussing the issue of education as it relates to crime. These women were ordinary people. So they're not the guys who drive in the BMWs and the Porsches. These men are hardworking, ordinary citizens, and they came from different parts of the country. All right, they were at a crime symposium held by the People's Roundtable, and I happened to be there to moderate the conversation. They were articulate. They understood what the issues were, and a question was asked, which resonated with me. Why can't we not have this conversation nationally?
Mm-hmm.
From a woman, right, who is a security guard. She's asking the question, why can't we not have this conversation nationally? And I will tell you, that's a question that has resonated with me, because every single point they raise was a relevant point if you are interested in education in society. They weren't schooled people. They didn't go and get their PhDs. But I can tell you, because I know the literature, that the points that they were raising were valid points. But we don't want to hear that. We want to hear how bad the government is, or how bad the opposition is. And we don't want to speak to each other. We want to curse each other instead and politicize every issue because we want to score points. And in the meanwhile, the society gets worse.
Now, I hear you very much in respect to that point, but I will shift it to the political aspect, because a lot of it deals, I think, politicians respond to what the people will say. And in that regard, I don't mean that politicians are taking on everything that people are complaining about. All that you've pointed out this morning has become so synonymous with the cries and the pleas of people here in TNT. The issue is, when it comes to elections, politicians will feed to people whatever it is they want to feed, whatever it is they think people want to hear. And it's also fueled a lot by racism. So a part of it, Mr. Phillip, is an attitude shift in people. Do you think it starts with there before it can even get to the top? Do you think it starts on the ground with people changing their mindset, their ways and their attitudes before it gets to the top?
Well, I have a different view of politics to you. All right. The reality of finance, campaign finance, the tender entrepreneurs, the guys who give money to get contracts, they have corrupted politics. So what you see when we see the politicians respond to those who raise their voices is a naive view, because they respond insofar as, and I'm going to use the Trinidadian word, insofar as they can throw to us scraps, or what we call a kakada, right? Enough to keep us quiet.
Mm-hmm.
But fundamental changes will never happen until we get campaign finance reform, because the guys who have the money, they're the ones who call in the shots. And we have to understand that completely. They're the ones who are exploiting racism for their own benefit. They want us to be divided. They want us to be separated, because they recognize that if we join together, it is not going to be game as usual.
Mr. Phillip, I'm sorry for interjecting. I'm not arguing against that. I fully agree and understand that. My argument is, why is it that we as a people keep falling for such? I don't know. I keep asking such questions. What you're saying this morning, I'm very much aware of. I've expressed similar sentiments, and you hear that. You hear such frustrations. Yet, why it is that we keep falling for these traps?
Well, the point I was going to make is that answer we have to go back to the way society was built. And I'm going to say something, and there are going to be people who are going to argue against it, but let me tell you my view of this thing. The Africans were brought here in slavery as tools or vehicles for growth, economic growth, for people who are in the minority and people who live many miles away. When they were given their right to be free, the same people turned around and brought in the indentured labor, which was another race. And they told both sides, don't trust the other. They characterized the Africans as lazy, and they characterized the East Indian as immoral. Does that sound familiar? Isn't that what we're still talking about today? That, my dear friend, is the problem. And all that we are not recognizing is that the structure has not changed. The names may have changed, the faces may have changed, but nothing else has changed. The same divisive system is perpetuated by the inheritors of the system.
Then whom is out of touch with who?
We are both out of touch. The powers that be are out of touch with the reality that society is going to collapse. That's the out of touch part of it. And we have a deficit in understanding because they do not recognize what happened to Eric Williams in 1970, where his base turned against him. All right? We who are on the other side of the fence, we are out of touch because we are not realizing that the problem we have is not our fellow man. The problem we have comes from the system under which we live. And until we turn our eyes and do the correct analyses, we are always going to look at what we have compared to what somebody else has and say, but what happened here? Well, what happened there is the system wants it that way. And it doesn't have to be that way. That's the problem. Both sides are out of touch.
Mr. Phillip, my final question to you is, it's always easy having such conversations, how deep people are willing to go. Even at times people would say it's so controversial, we stay far away from it. But I'm of the opinion that it's a lot easier to have these conversations. The difficult part is the conversations actually turning into something meaningful, where you see some level of change taking place. Do you suppose change starts with conversation? We've been having these conversations for years. When do you suppose TNT will start changing this direction, changing this course? And when do you suppose that this selfish and caring nature of which we've all become will actually be reversed?
Well, I'm old enough to have a mother who says, those who don't hear will feel. Sadly, we are only going to change it when we feel. And I'll give you an example. When I graduated from secondary school, I went to QRC, had a good education, graduated. I went for an interview in a bank because the school sent me to that interview on Independence Square, the head office at the bank. The person invigilating the exam helped my peer, who was also in my class, what we call Trinidad white guy. He didn't help me. I overheard him telling the guy what a penny was in Canadian terms. I answered the question based on what he told the other guy, and he was upset with me. I didn't get hired. However, within 2 years, after Daga and the rest passed through Port of Spain, we suddenly saw the Chinese and the white tellers change into black and then eventually East Indian tellers. That's how change comes. When people get fed up and threaten the system to mash it up, then the system says, hold on, take a little thing here now. And that's how it works, unfortunately.
So do you suppose it's inevitable that TNT is going to go through such, I will, careful with my words, but it sounds as though
find the words.
A revolution.
Call
it sounds as a revolt,
yes,
a revolution.
Call it.
Is it inevitable?
If we don't change, as I said, if we are not in a place where we listen, then we will pay to listen.
Mr. Philip, go on, sorry.
I am not here as a revolutionary. I spent my entire life in business. I spent my entire existence in business. So I'm not here as a wild-eyed radical. I'm here as an observer of the society, and I'm saying to you, we are tipping towards chaos, like there is in Haiti, right? Like there is in Jamaica. Jamaica has started to turn around because the business class is more patriotic than our business class. And I make no apologies for that.
Mr. Philip, I want to thank you very much for your time this morning and for expressing your views. I look forward to future conversations, but the last sentiments of which you've expressed, you're not the first individual whom I've heard that from. So it's intriguing how the conversations or the directions of the conversations are flowing here in TNT. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Have a good day. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a break here on AM Prime, and when we return, we'll get into some other conversations this morning. We'll be right back.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Folks, we're back and better than ever.
Your show have always appeared to be a show that is focused on going to the cause or looking to the cause.
We hardly ever talk about the white-collar crime, though. We always talk about the ones that involve more as physical violence against individuals.
The citizens will only measure transmission when water starts to flow through their taps.
The Constitution doesn't talk about local election.
Contract mafia that's responsible for looting the country, and they own and operate these politicians.
So if you are running a country and you can't say nothing as a prime minister, please take up your bag and go.
It is not comparative to the murder figures, but it is in fact very high.
I believe he's protecting certain individuals.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Nah, you don't need to register nothing. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploiting the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. My next conversation focuses on the probate office. The judiciary agrees that probate matters take far too long. This was admitted in a two-page statement issued on February 7th in response to complaints of the probate process. I wonder why it's taken so long for the judiciary to actually respond to this issue, given that it's been raised within the last few years. Even from Tobago writing letters to the judiciary seeking some answers to what is causing the delays. After one article in a daily newspaper indicated that there are over 14,000, close to 15,000 actually, pending probate matters, and with 7,690 probate matters completed in 1,095 days between August 2020 and July 2023, it's still estimated that it will take 5 to 8 years to complete at the present rate. I'm joined this morning by attorney at law, Ms. Sain Singh, so we have a better understanding of the entire process and of the situation as a whole. She joins us virtually. Good morning, Ms. Singh. How are you doing?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on the program and taking the time out of your schedule. Let's start with this admission on the part of the judiciary that these matters are taking far too long. They've said it's threefold, but they've even indicated that it's not necessarily in their hands. Issues with recruitment, with the quality of applications. Let me start by asking if you can give us, as brief as could be, the entire process from an individual who passes on to the reading of a will to this entire matter with the probate office. Can you give us the process, please?
Okay, so most people will go through experiencing having a loved one die. And when that occurs, sometimes the loved one will have assets that are still in their name or shares in a particular asset that has to be dealt with. Now, they either die leaving a will or without a will. When that occurs, if they leave a will, we go through a process called proving the will. If they die without leaving a will, we go through a process called letters of administration. Now, when persons come into us, we go through the entire process in terms of what type of application they should make based on their particular circumstances. Those circumstances determine the type of application that we are going to make, because there are multiple type of applications, such as probate of a will, letters of administration of will annex, and each type of application requires different information on those applications. So we will go through that process with our client and then determine who is best to make that application, because not everyone is entitled to make the application. There is a hierarchy. When we determine who is best based on their particular circumstances, then we explain all the documents that we need, how we need to inform the beneficiaries, as if there is a will, if there is the need to read out the will for all the beneficiaries to hear the contents of the will. And we start asking them to bring in certain documents that would help us determine what makes up the estate. What are the assets that makes up the estate? If it's real estate, if it is bank accounts, shares, bonds, anything that will help us determine what is the value of the estate that is going to go into the application. Now that process itself takes a little while.
Usually are these matters heard within a court? When there are arguments to be made, are they usually heard in court? Are they oral hearings, or is there no need for that?
So it is a paper application. It is a paper application that we are making to the Supreme Court of Trinidad and Tobago.
All right.
Yes. And because it is a paper application, the requirements that need to be in each application has to satisfy the registrar in granting or issuing that letters of administration or a grant of probate.
Now, one of the issues raised, according to the statement by the judiciary, is the quality of applications, saying that roughly 80% are returned to attorneys with significant and justified queries. So it speaks to the role of attorneys in particular. How do you, as an attorney at law, respond to the statement by the judiciary to that effect?
So the quality of applications is an issue because there are queries. A query is actually the judiciary asking you to clarify a particular statement you made or something that you had forgotten to put into the application, or sometimes just something that you did not actually account for. When an attorney drafts a particular application, we try to determine each and every aspect of what the registrar may require in a particular application. Each case is not identical. So what you would have is different requirements for each particular case. So one precedent will not work for all type of applications, or even one precedent in a similar type of application will not work for each and every single case similar to that. What attorneys who are experienced in probate do, we do try to minimize questions being asked by trying to account for things that we know that probate will ask for. So persons who are not experienced in probate may not actually put that into their application, and then they will get a longer query notice, so to say, right? For them to address the concerns that probate may have. Because you see, not everybody in law actually practices probate. Some of us do practice criminal, some of us are not experienced in other areas of law.
And that was
so sometimes we try our hands. Yes, we do try our hands at a different area, but it do come with experience and getting to know each type of application and what are the requirements of each type of application.
What are some of the issues that you faced in this entire process? And I'm speaking about experiences without going into particular details of any one case, but what are some of the issues that you faced and experienced that just add to the delays?
So the ones I experience is when I make an application and it is first reviewed, I do not get a feedback right away from probate about if the application has a query or not. And sometimes months may pass before I actually get a query notice, or I may get a statement stating that there was no query notice issued and the file is by the registrar. So there is a delay in terms of when the file is first reviewed and when it reaches to the registrar for their review. That is one. And that delay is a few months. Well, there's also a delay that when a estate has been advertised. So it went through the process, there's no query notice issued, everything is good with it. The registrar gave their approval for it to be advertised. It is advertised in the respective gazette and newspaper. However, there is a delay from advertisement to the issue of grants. So we need that particular process to be sorted out and to be done in a more timely manner, because it takes sometimes months between the advertisement in a newspaper, and this is where clients, when they see their particular estate being advertised, they come to you and say, I see it advertised, so it can't be long now. And then months pass, sometimes 3 months, sometimes 4 months, without a grant being issued. And we do have a lot of client care with regard to probate matters, trying to allay the stress that this particular process have on people who are still mourning for their loved ones, people who are looking to settle some debts that their loved ones may have left, or just the distribution of the assets that was left by their loved ones, and they can't do anything until they get this particular document.
Mm-hmm. Now, you see, the thing is, since this matter was raised at the end of January, and this is ongoing, by the way, because as I mentioned a few years ago, attorneys from Tobago were raising this issue, and it's ongoing, but I've spoken to several individuals who have expressed to me and it seems so common. Everything they say is that, you know, the entire process, you know, the attorneys work hard, it goes through, and then all of a sudden there seems to be one issue which has to be rectified. The documents are then returned, and then there's another issue, and it seems to be a back and forth. There just seems to be a constant back and forth for checks being made by the probate office. And the impression is, it seems as though they look at the first page of all the documents, see an issue, then when it's returned and rectified, they then turn the page. It's an ongoing process that is very frustrating. Is that something that you yourself have experienced?
I wouldn't say that I have experienced much of that. What I have experienced is when a query is issued, sometimes some of the queries are not relevant. Probate have admitted that their staff are not, that they do need training, right, with regard to reviewing probate matters, because these are staff that are not, do not have a law degree. They are appointed by, I think, the civil service, which is Service Commission, I believe, and they do not have that particular training in checking documents that are drafted by attorneys. So sometimes certain queries we do believe are irrelevant, right? And should not have even been a query to begin with. Now, that doesn't mean that there are queries that are not irrelevant, right? But sometimes when we answer a particular query that is given, it raises another issue. Also, there are different persons, so there are two checks according to probate, right? There are the first review. So the first review is done, and then a query notice would be issued. After that, when you submit that particular document, it goes through another review before it reaches the registrar to further review the documents. And I think this is where certain queries that should have been issued in the first instance are now being picked up, which shouldn't be, because this creates an additional delay when we could have already addressed those things at the first instance, rather than waiting for it to be reviewed and reaching to the last stage before it comes back to us.
Are you satisfied with the judiciary's response to these issues? They've indicated that they continue to seek solutions. They've identified some solutions already that are already in place, such as annotated forms on the judiciary's website to help applicants, training sessions on drafting properly, introducing a system for managing searches through the e-probate portal. Those are just some of the measures that they've already established. But generally speaking, are you satisfied with the judiciary's response to this entire situation and their efforts to try and ease the burden faced by individuals who have had these delays?
So for a long time, we had the annotated forms that was on the judiciary website. The e-services platform that came into play when COVID hit Trinidad and Tobago, and we had to find an alternative form of filing documents. And we overcame those things. But what is not satisfactory, I believe, is that when judiciary says that their staff, they do not have control over their staff. They do not have control over who is appointed and their skill level and the training that is required to be in probate department in order to check these particular types of applications. And that seems to be that it appears that they don't have control over that. They may not have control over that for a very long time, so that the problem would persist with regard to delays. Now, one of the articles did mention that some of the delays are probably 6 years to 8 years. Now, those are based on statistics, according to the article, statistics or data gathered from probate department with regard to how many applications are made per year, how many applications were granted, and how many applications are outstanding. But probate department, it's not 6 to 8 years. Probate department actually reviews each application based on its own merit. Right now, in my experience, I have gotten grants in less than 8 months with regard to filing, within filing and actually having the grants in my hand. And that is as recent as last week, right? So each application is actually each application is processed based on its own merits. Now, if we could take away from our particular things, attorneys could take away certain things with regard to having query notices or making sure that certain things are conformed to with regard to each application, it can reduce the time, because probate did go through the entire process for us. And they streamline particular applications. If an application generates a query notice, it goes down a longer procedure. If it doesn't generate a query notice, it goes through a faster procedure, right? Now, that faster procedure is still 8 months, probably a year. But one of the things that is still what would have us still having delays, inordinate delays, unreasonable delays, is the staffing issue that probate has indicated.
I'm curious to know, in the instance where the executor of the will, if this process is so delayed, and for many reasons of which you expressed this morning, and from which we know based off of the judiciary's response, if the executor of the will passes on during this entire process, what then happens? What then transpires?
So, like I said in the beginning, there are different types of applications to be made. So if there is a will and there is a named executor, that executor is entitled to prove that will, which is an application they make. We call it a grant of probate at the end of the day when they get it. Now, if the executor either passes or renounces his position, the beneficiaries, right, in the residue of the will are now entitled to make an application. It's called letters of administration with will annex. So it doesn't affect the proving of the will. It's just a different type of application with different requirements. So
then the process kind of begins all over again.
It does, if we made an application. So if in the process that the executor did die, right, after we made the application, then yes, we have to withdraw that particular application and the process starts again.
Now, my final question to you, what advice would you share to viewers this morning if they are facing these difficulties? Because, as I mentioned, one major part of the issue the judiciary has pointed out is the quality of applications, relevant or required documents not necessarily always being there. What would be your advice to people who are facing these frustrations?
Not to be intimidated by the process. It is a long process, but it needs to be done, because without it, you cannot move forward with regard to a deceased's assets. And what we see happening when people shy away from the process is that we see grandparents' estates not being done or great-grandparents' estates not being done, and then we have to go down a very long chain to see who is best to make those applications coming down. And they cannot really do much with the particular asset until those estates higher up are done, right? So if a loved one leaves a particular asset that needs to be administered, don't shy away from the process. Go to an attorney, find out how experienced they are in regards to matters of probate. The attorney will explain the process as much as possible. Know that there is a delay, right? The expectations, of course, are that we try to get certain things done as quick as possible so that so that clients feel like if they are completing this particular process in a timely manner. However, the expectations and the reality are two different things, and attorneys need to be able to alleviate the fears or the stress created by the actual process. With regard to the, sorry about that. With regard to I do apologize.
No, that's absolutely fine actually, because you've actually shared some sound advice to those viewing this morning. So no worries about that. And it's honestly quite a lot to. I mean, there's a lot more that we could have touched on, and there's a lot more to delve into. It's quite a lot to even digest. But that is where we actually conclude our conversation this morning, because we are over time, and I know that this conversation has been delayed, well, for many reasons. Quite ironic, isn't it, that the conversation was delayed? But Ms. Singh, thank you so very much for your time and joining me on the program this morning, and for sharing
You are most welcome.
this information with all of us. And well, I guess we have an attorney at law whom we could call on to now give us more education and information on these issues when it arises within the public domain. So thank you so much for your time this morning.
You are most welcome.
Have a good day, Ms. Singh. All the very best.
You too.
Senior Law Singh joining me on the program this morning, and sound advice that she shared with us at the end of that conversation. Do not be intimidated by this entire issue, and she even spoke of her attorneys really trying to help the situation or help the anxiety associated with the situation. So thank you very much, Ms. Singh, for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for AM Prime. I'm Keaton Shaw, wishing you a good day ahead, a grand one, a safe one, and in all that has happened, I really hope that you enjoyed Carnival, you've gotten rest, as we now head into a period of reflection. We'll see you again tomorrow morning on the program. Take care now. Bye-bye.
WESN.
This Monday, with the people, for the people.
If we continue doing it how we're doing it, we'll stay in the situation that we are in currently.
KPB Plus leads the opposition anti-crime town hall at the Shogunos Borough Corporation, a special 2-hour prime time event.
But what is probably the greatest cause of crime, in my opinion, is the perceived injustice in the country.
How can we tackle a problematic crime rate, a failing justice system, without addressing things as basic as forensics in this country?
With special guest speaker, scholar and intellectual Professor Selwyn Kojo on crime and national development. Plus, a look at the opposition crime plan and a Q&A talkback live. Crime affects everyone. The opposition anti-crime town hall at the Shogunos Borough Corporation. Coverage begins 6 p.m. Monday on WESN Content Capital. Live stream on all platforms.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today. The newest book is here, Closer to the Church, the debut novel by author and former mayor Louis Lee Singh. Available at all the home store branches, Barataria, West Mall, Shogunas and C3 San Fernando. Paper-based bookshop 10 Nook Avenue, St. Anne's. WESN 30A Gattaca Street, Woodbrook. Metropolitan Bookshop, Ariapita Avenue, Woodbrook, and all RIK bookstores nationwide. Available online as paperback on Amazon.com and Kindle for e-readers. For more info, call 628-5835 or 389-6504. Also available from author Louis Lee Singh, I Used to Live in Heaven, Letters to My Granddaughters, and Local Government in Trinidad, Conspiracy Against the People.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
My name is Carl Media. I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Now you don't need to register nothing. You don't need. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and, I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploiting the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God, so we kind of have to stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's being the victim,
right,
or the man who's being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI, worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
Folks, we're back and better than ever.
Your show have always appeared to be a show that is focused on going to the cause or looking to the cause.
We hardly ever talk about the white-collar crime, though. We always talk about the ones that involve more as physical violence against individuals.
The citizens will only measure transmission when water starts to flow through their taps.
The Constitution doesn't talk about local election.
Contract mafia that's responsible for looting the country and they own and operate these politicians.
So if you are running a country and you can't say nothing as a prime minister, please take up your bag and go.
It is not comparative to the murder figures, but it is in fact very high.
I believe he's protecting certain individuals.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm not to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the
not no.
Let's go to the last part.
We are WESN, the premier platform for Caribbean content. WESN, covering West, East, South, and North. WESN, we entertainment, sports, and news. WESN, available on Greendot 7, Amplia 118, Airlink 17, Bmobile 107, Digicel 21, ICNTT 105, and Flow 110. Connect with us at WESNCC or stream online at www.wesncc.com. WESN, your premier platform for Caribbean content.
At least bring the issue forward. But it doesn't mean that because we're believing, maybe, probably, hopefully, Judith Godrèche and all the actresses that are coming forward talking about what happened when they were children, I'm not sure this is going to transform into actually believing also the adult. I mean, this younger, we're 14, 13, you know, it's terrible. And I think everyone can relate. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and it's specific to this complément d'enquête, so this program on national French TV that happened in December. It was about Gérard Depardieu. And in that our show program, only few minutes stood out. And it's the moment where Gérard Depardieu actually makes special comments about a very young girl in North Korea. And this happened in front of a camera, in front of everyone's eyes. So all of a sudden, in your living room, you have this French icon that is sexualizing an 11-year-old girl. And I think this was a shock for everyone. But as our other guest was saying, I think the judicial response has not been here. Yes, women have been talking. They actually have been talking before the Me Too movement, but they've been talking a lot since the Me Too movement. And no one is behind bars. I mean, so...
And this is when you contrast it to the US, for instance.
Of course. I mean, Harvey Weinstein is in jail. Nobody in France is in jail right now.
Now, Ariane, if we talk about the place of French cinema, specifically in the cultural landscape here, we're talking about these icons, as Solène mentioned, national treasures, people like Gérard Depardieu, but also filmmakers, this special status that France has of the auteur of cinema. How much do you think that influences perceptions here?
Yeah, it's definitely a difference that exists between France and the US. For example, it's this creation of an auteur which started during the Nouvelle Vague, who gives basically all the power to the director. He's also the writer and has a control over all the cast and everybody and everything. Which, if this power is put into the hands of a person who is not really willing to take care of people he's working with, or just be respectful, meaning maybe being an abuser, this can lead to something very, very dangerous. And I think that's one of our French exceptions, and that's also why it's so difficult for some people to maybe step back and lose some power. And I think that's also one of the reasons why that in France we're scared of the intimacy coordinator that exists and worked for 6 years now in the US and in the UK, and most of the French directors are afraid of it and just refuse to use that, which I think says a lot about the fear of losing power. Actors also have an opinion and they need to give their consentment to do some scenes, and it's very hard for an actor to say no to the director on set. And all of that culture, it needs to circulate and I think people on every level of the production need to be aware of that and start to learn.
Indeed, speaking of institutional responses, France's public body, the National Centre for Cinema, which finances and promotes film here, has been under pressure to tackle what some term a culture of sexism and harassment in the industry. Here's more on the measures they've taken.
To help the producers meet our obligations regarding sexual and gender-based violence, we organised a mandatory training course to help them understand what the challenges are, how that can play out, what we define as violence, etc. In 2024, we'll maintain this mandatory training course, and we'll make it obligatory for the entire film crew so that everyone in the process is involved in preventing sexual and gender-based violence.
Solène, what do you think of these sort of initiatives?
Well, of course it's great. I mean, you cannot have anyone on set saying, well, I didn't know I was not allowed to do this, or I didn't know I was not allowed to do that. So I think definitely this is something to encourage. I think the question is this really enough? Because this is the conversation we had just earlier about and also with Ariane, the balance of power. It's not enough when you don't try to shift the balance of power.
Mm. Ariane, you started this association recently with other actors. Was it prompted by what you felt was a lack of solidarity between female actors? And, is it really seen as a need for a support network as such?
Yeah, definitely. It was not really a lack of support. It was a lack of communication, basically, and a lack of sharing our stories and our traumas, basically. And so, yeah, it really appeared that it was an emergency to gather all together and to start to try to raise our voices together. So we decided to create that group to exist and to take part of the conversation about how things should be.
Well, as the industry undergoes a reckoning of sorts at the moment, the cultural magazine Télérama actually published an editorial admitting their complicity in promoting certain filmmakers. They apologised, in fact, for their role in this. Solène, how much do you think the media is at fault?
It's hard to tell. It's also hard to tell how the media is actually treating this question right now. I think it's hard to go back in times, 30 years ago and see where we should have done this, we should have done that. It was probably even worse. So I think what is interesting is to see what the media is doing right now. How the media is actually listening or not listening to women coming forward. And yes, some of them, especially Télérama, I think also Cahiers des Cinémas, they also are saying maybe we didn't do the right things, 30, 40 years ago. But these are different teams. Again, these are different journalists, different generation of journalists. These are also women, also at the head of those magazines right now. So it does make a difference.
I want to ask both of you, starting with you, Solène, how much of this is actually generational? Are we going to have to wait for a generation of older men to retire from the industry before we see some sort of significant change in the sector?
Well, I hope not. I think, yes, it's definitely generational. As I was talking about Gérard Depardieu earlier, the women who started also bringing the case is the youngest one. And she was then joined by older actresses. And I think because she was young and she was from a different generation, she couldn't even think accepting what happened.
Ariane, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I agree totally. I just hope that we can also find allies into the oldest generation so we can actually go through that together. And I don't want this to become a war in between the young generation and the oldest one. So yeah, like Solène said, I really hope that this can happen right now. There's also a sense of emergency, and I hope this can be heard now that the change needs to happen now.
And Ariane, do you think that, for example, as someone who's a screenwriter and a director as well, do you think this new generation of women behind the camera, or perhaps in more producing roles, women like Justine Triet, Céline Sciamma, Mathilde Diop, who are being recognised, do you think that will necessarily change things?
It's not only about the behavior on set, it's also what story we're sharing to the world and what fiction we can access as an audience. And this has a huge impact in our society. So the more we can also listen to different stories made by women or made by, not only white male men, heterosexual, this might finally open a new relationship to fiction, and I think this can also open eyes and mind. Yeah.
Well, let's hope so. Thank you very much to both of you for your time. That's all we have time for, sadly.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for this special edition. You can catch both Arts 24 and the 51% on France24.com. You can also find both shows on Instagram, X and Facebook. So bye for now.
Bye for now.
The world is ever changing. The news doesn't wait.
France 24 gives a global perspective that an educated, intelligent, and active viewer is going to want to have to be able to fully understand the issues of the day.
That's why it will always be there to help make sense of world events.
J'ai l'habitude de suivre France 24 partout où je me trouve, et ce grâce à mon smartphone, parce que je ne reste pas souvent devant la télé.
Quand une information circule sur la toile, j'utilise l'application de France 24 pour vérifier l'authenticité.
For the best international coverage, 24 hours a day, no matter what, France 24 is with you everywhere, all the time.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.
When the coup happened, it's just like somebody switched off the light. Just like.
This is not the world like the two countries like Russia, like Ukraine. But in Myanmar, we are not fighting with the other country. The killings our people.
We're gonna finish this fight. And we were trying to go back to our old life. Rich or poor, we don't care.
Myanmar, united against the junta, in Reporters Plus, on France 24 and France24.com.
Questions mount over Alexei Navalny's death. His mother denied access to his body, while his widow vowing to continue the politician's work. The latest from Dave Keating in Brussels, coming up. Meanwhile, Russian forces complete their takeover of Avdiivka, its sources seizing a huge coke and chemical plant, that the last bastion of Ukrainian resistance in the eastern city. And also coming up, a deadline to prevent the full-scale attack on Rafah. Israel says Hamas has until the start of Ramadan to release all hostages, otherwise troops will storm the Palestinian city. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Nadia Massi in Paris. We start then with the news that the family of Alexei Navalny is stepping up its demands for information about his death. The Russian opposition leader died on Friday in a penal colony in the Arctic, but few details have been made public. Russian authorities say investigations are ongoing, but this morning Navalny's mother was denied access to the mortuary where his body is reportedly being held, while Navalny's widow, Yulia Navalnyina, has issued a video message blaming Vladimir Putin directly for his death.
We know exactly why Putin killed Alexei 3 days ago. We will tell you about it soon. We will definitely find out who exactly and how exactly this crime was carried out. We will name names and show faces.
And indeed, Navalny is meeting EU leaders today in Brussels. Covering developments for us is Dave Keating. He's at the European Council. He's with me now. Dave, it was a strong and a rather emotional statement we just heard there by Navalny's widow. What's her message today, would you say, to the public and to European leaders?
Yeah, I mean, the message that Yulia Navalnaya is giving to the EU foreign ministers here meeting behind me is very similar to what she was saying at the Munich Security Conference over the weekend, and that is that Vladimir Putin murdered her husband simply because he is a political opponent of Vladimir Putin. Now, as the EU's foreign ministers arrived this morning for this summit, which was a regularly scheduled summit to which she has been invited, they all had strong words of encouragement for her, but also harsh condemnation of what has happened with Navalny for Navalny's death. We had several leaders saying that the EU, several foreign ministers rather, saying that the EU should take action. Now, in terms of the strength of the word, certainly the strongest came from the EU's foreign security chief, because not only did he say that the EU would pursue a new round of sanctions specifically against the people responsible for Navalny's death, so that would include his jailers, anyone involved in the conviction and in the subsequent death. But also, Josep Borrell wants to rename the entire EU human rights sanctions blacklist after Navalny. So you would get that whole regime that covers the whole globe, not just Russia, named after Alexei Navalny. Apparently he's going to propose that to foreign ministers today. We'll see what their reaction is. But certainly she's heard a strong message of support from the EU's foreign ministers. But the question is, will this galvanize action? What can this actually lead to in terms of the EU increasing its support for Ukraine or tightening the screws on Russia?
Indeed. I mean, as you say there,
EU sanctions are very much expected now, but of course sanctions already imposed on Russia in the wake of the invasion of Ukraine. So are these new possible sanctions likely actually to make a difference?
Yeah, so we're hearing that these are likely to get passed today. So this is the latest round of sanctions against Russia. The EU is already extremely heavily sanctioning Russia, so there's not actually much left for them to do. Most of this will be an extension of the specific list of people who are barred from entering the EU or doing business with the EU. Now, I've been told that last night 26 of the 27 EU countries have agreed that latest sanctions round, but that leaves just one, and you can guess which one it is. It's Hungary. This is yet another meeting where they are trying to overcome a veto by Viktor Orban's Hungarian government. This being an area of foreign policy, it needs unanimous approval. So we're still waiting to hear from this meeting happening right now if Hungary will okay these sanctions. It has been standing in the way of this latest round of sanctions for some time. They're also talking about other issues here today. They're talking about the situation in Gaza. They're being briefed by a UN representative about the efforts to help people in Gaza. We're also expecting today an approval of the EU's Red Sea mission to protect shipping in the Red Sea from Houthi rebels attacking from Yemen. I've heard that that has gotten political approval just now here at this meeting of foreign ministers. It would still need a final rubber stamp by EU officials on Wednesday, but it looks like that is going ahead. That EU defense mission to protect shipping in the Red Sea is now going to become a reality following this decision just now by EU foreign ministers.
In Brussels. Thanks very much. Well, there has been some reaction today from the Kremlin to the death of Navalny. The Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov telling reporters that blaming the Kremlin was, quote, vulgar, and he went on to say the investigation into Navalny's death is being carried out in accordance with Russian law. Now, across Russia, hundreds of people in more than 30 cities were arrested over the weekend during ad hoc memorials to Navalny. The largest such crackdown appeared to be in St. Petersburg, where around 200 people were detained by police. Now, before the arrests began, people who turned out laid flowers and candles to honour the opposition leader. Next, let's take you to
WESN.
Welcome, folks, one and all. This is Talking Mon here on WSN, your content capital. We would like to welcome all of our valued viewers at home and abroad. Of course, a lot is happening on our little twin island republic. Or perhaps maybe it doesn't seem like it because we bury our heads in the sand. Which side of that line do you fall on? Because I understand it's a very real human phenomenon where people don't have the time or they're afraid to get involved. I get it. And we see this played out in many aspects of life. Unfortunately, when we're talking about governance, when we're talking about the direction of our country, it's not quite the same thing as, say, being involved in your community or being involved in the management of your gated community, of your shared property, of your homeowners association for those in the United States or other parts of the world that have such a thing. There might be some quasi-similar structures here in TNT. Of course, community watch groups, crime watch groups, etc., in order to neighborhood watch, in order to feel safe. But far too many people don't want to be involved, even at their own local level, for their own immediate interests. And then what do we have to deal with regards to national interests? Now, one of the things that came up before we start off the daily review, one of the things that came up with regards to Carnival is fears coming out of a report of 5 COVID deaths since December the 26th into very early January, I believe. 6 COVID deaths, sorry. There's always been the question now, okay, so what's the post-Carnival report with regards to COVID and other respiratory diseases? And it has come out that there are a few more deaths. It now stands at 15, so I believe there were 9 more. How much of that is attributed to Carnival? It's difficult to say, right? Obviously, it's not unreasonable to assume that Carnival had a part to play, but one of the things that I'm not entirely sure, this is just a preliminary glance at the report, you know, with regards to the details of when these deaths happened, etc., etc. I don't even necessarily know to what extent contact tracing is still being done, but it just goes to show with 15 deaths now since December 26th, up until this point, yes, technically it's a small number, relatively speaking, but then one could argue, you know, each death is one death too many. So it's just a reminder, folks, that COVID is still there. Now, with that out of the way, let's start off today's daily review. And our first story is one that was not supposed to have any controversy at all, as much as the subject matter would not just naturally include some amount of controversy. And that, of course, I'm speaking about the debate. I mean, to what extent are parliamentary debates really debates as opposed to just, you know, arguments or grandstanding by some members of parliament? The debate over appointing new deputy commissioners of police, well, the matter was brought forth on Friday, and 3 out of the 4 names were approved. 2 substantive, 1 acting. But what was interesting was one of the names nominated, the Minister of National Security, extolled the praises of the individual, and then government proceeded to not vote for the candidate. I believe it was 20 votes against. What also makes it interesting is, I think one of the opposition MPs brought up allegations against the subject, and it's in the papers, so the name is, it's not going to be a revelation to the public. Assistant Commissioner of Police Wanda Lucas, I believe one of the opposition members brought up the fact that Mr. Lucas has questions with regards to being the head of, I believe it's white-collar crime, while also conducting private practice where he may or may not have some sort of conflict of interest, right? And a past investigation asked those questions, potentially alluded to as such a report from, I believe it was a while ago. The opposition MPs abstained after, I believe it was MP Rudal Munilal, after he brought up questions about the, I guess you could say, appropriateness of this candidate. They abstained and then turned around and basically asked the question, well, how could you reject a candidate without giving him a reason why? So in my mind, this whole thing is extraordinarily strange. And the police association is querying the situation as well, the police union. They find it strange as well. But I think they find it strange with regards to their officer, their member being rejected. But I find it strange how it unfolded. In the fact that it seemed as though the opposition was ready to make a case, hence, and I'm not even entirely sure if the opposition expected to win, but it seemed as though they were expecting to make a case about how is this candidate allowed, blah, 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 look at his track record, questions over his head, allegations over his head, and the government apparently it seems potentially knew enough to know, hey, we're not actually going to vote him in, and potentially took the wind out of the sails of a brownie point the opposition was trying to score. And then, of course, now the opposition has to change tracks and say, well, what is the reason for not approving him, for rejecting him? They need to give a reason. Which is strange, because it seems as though the government was more or less going along with the opposition's train of thought, and then the opposition was like, hold on, wait a second, we can't oppose something that agrees with us, so we need to not necessarily flip, but we need to find a way to continue making it an issue. Meanwhile, the Minister of National Security looks quite curious, again, speaking in glowing terms allegedly in Parliament, I did not watch the session, of Mr. Lucas's career, and then government, it's not even, you know, some members voted for him, and it wasn't like it was a debate, like a contested situation of personal opinion or anything like that. It was a situation where it seemed as though, because usually one would think they have a plan going into these things. This is how we're going to vote. And they brief their members beforehand, one would hope, right? And they carried out the plan, which means, you know, was it just that they didn't want to insult ACP Lucas? I mean, I could understand that. The thing is, and this is one of the things that the association needs to understand. For Parliament and for parliamentarians and for the majority bench / what we call the government, but let's not forget the government includes the minority opposition. When you have somebody with allegations over their head and you already have the perception of whether it's weakness, incompetence, a bad perception of the service already, the last thing you could afford politically is to then promote somebody who has potentially allegations already in advance against them, whether proven or not, for it to then potentially be proven to be true later down the road. Now I get it, it's not necessarily fair, it's not as though he's been arrested. If he did anything wrong, he shouldn't even be in the current position. That is to say, Mr. Lucas, he shouldn't be in the position he currently is in anyway. But they haven't necessarily taken action against him with regards to removing him, convicting him of anything, etc., etc., disciplinary matters, etc., etc., anything substantial, right? But at the same time, whether we like it or not, we, the public, the stakeholders, would be looking at a candidate that potentially has suspicion hanging over his head, and it has not been cleared. And far too often in TNT, you know, we let people kind of get away with, oh, well, nothing's been proven, but I'm suspected of X. But no one actually fights for to clear their name and acts out to push forward transparency, to push forward accountability. As I said, for the very least to clear their name, right? Everybody is, and maybe not Mr. Lucas, maybe he is the exception to the norm, but generally speaking, everybody is fine with all the gray area where all of the rubbish could hide. And the environment then leads us to this situation where, to the general public, really and truly, do we want Parliament to put someone in a substantial position of Deputy Commissioner of Police who has question marks? At this point, is that what the public wants? So while it might seem unfair to Mr. Lucas, and I understand the union's position, I can't necessarily fault the government, and by government I do mean the majority and the minority. The government majority and the opposition minority who abstained. They didn't necessarily attempt to fight the issue, because I think they were ready to argue, why is he being appointed? And when he wasn't, well, that whole line of thinking kind of went up in smoke. And for the opposition asking, well, what is the reason why he was rejected? To be honest, you kind of gave the government a layup. You could just point to your comments in the debate. Well, that's why. Maybe it's not appropriate, maybe it's not enough, I don't know. But again, the TTPS has a perception problem, a public perception problem. The government also has a public perception problem. Politicians have a public perception problem. So you don't have the capital, you don't have the benefit of the doubt to do things that are questionable. In theory. The reality, of course, is when they're ready, they will do things that are questionable. And for the most part, not everybody is involved enough to actually utilize rectifying action to hold politicians to account. Because if we're not going to get involved in our own communities, why are we going to necessarily get involved in the higher end governance of our country? And as the voting population, we are supposed to be involved in the governance of our country. It's just how. But anyway, let's move on to the next story. And an unfortunate follow-up, I guess you could say. It might just become a meme for those who know what that is. But the police recruitment exams that were slated, I believe, coming up this Saturday, or sorry, last Saturday, they were postponed due to an IT problem, an alleged IT problem. This, of course, comes somewhat on the heels of the fact that the promotion exercise had a glitch in the Excel spreadsheet. I don't think it necessarily says what the IT problem is. It has caused the recruits or the candidates, 1,500 apparently, to have the examination rescheduled. Of course, it delays everything, which when you're going for a job interview, it potentially delays, how soon you could get into the pipeline and how soon you could start to, collect a check for salary when you get to whichever point you start to receive money for your efforts, right? So it delays you getting the job you're trying to apply for. Not easy, given the economic situation at hand. And apparently the disruption in the system, they could not even necessarily send emails with regards to informing them of the examination date. Not all were affected, but enough, right? And I get it. Organizations face issues, nothing is perfect. Technical challenges happen to everybody. But to some extent, and maybe this is piling on, it's not a good look. It's not a good look. And the unfortunate thing is the TTPS exists in the wide environment of Trinidad and Tobago, where in Trinidad and Tobago we do have we do have low expectations. Let's just be real. Because we, as it was said on this show, I believe it was by a caller last week Friday, we're reactionary. We're not proactive, we're not preventative. We were kind of preventative with COVID, but even then, we dropped the ball because the borders open, right? At times, when things get really serious, we're a little bit proactive. But the fact of the matter is, what many of us think is serious, and what the government decides is serious, and by government I mean all the politicians, not just the PNM, that's not always the same thing. And maybe I'm in the minority here. But I think police recruitment and having your IT processes, correct, well, for your police service on a whole, is something that's rather important. Because we're not talking about business documentation and you have setbacks and delays. Now they have wider implications with regards to the rest of the service. To what extent did these technical difficulties hamper the services administration on a larger scale, beyond just recruitment? And let's not forget the fact that, hey, this recruitment thing is a big deal, right? I mean, it's basically the main thing coming out of the budget for the police service, right? That was the big olive branch to the public, the big, how should I put it? The dazzling gift, the means to show, hey, we're doing something This is the thing that we're doing. And yes, other things were added, like the $100 million for hotspots, which we've heard no more details about. Minister of National Security said, well, the Prime Minister will speak about it. And then, from what I remember, didn't really, right? You can't, well, and maybe this is because you have the government and the police service, and they're not exactly the same thing, despite the fact that we feel that the government has influence over the service. But the disconnect there's enough where government says, whoa, look at this, look at what we're doing, and now the whole process is fumbled. It's not a good look. Again, the service has a perception deficit. And this is not the only question with regards to the services administration, which, need I remind you, that the current police commissioner, her career was in administration. Something that was pointed out by the opposition in the debate of the DCPs, pointing out that, hey, actual experience good, career path of administration, and a lack of field experience bad. And questions arose if that was a dig at the commissioner. I'm paraphrasing how it was put forward. But again, when that is her background and we have administration problems, and yes, I get it, IT is not quite exactly what administration means, but to some extent it is. Can't even get the little things right. All right, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll continue the daily review here on Talking Point on WESN. There is some good news, just a little bit. Stay tuned, we'll be back after this.
Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. Before we even start this repatriation and reintegration process, we've already failed, or are we doomed to fail?
You've got to invest in the institutions that you've established to carry out those sorts of core functions.
We now get into the regional updates to give you an understanding of what's happening across our neighboring islands.
We have available a number of films that are worth showing.
So it was day one when the French Revolution started to develop the concept of universal human rights.
What happened this time is unprecedented. It's one of the largest terrorist attacks in history.
Let's welcome Carl to the program. Carl is over there, next in stuff. Hello, Carl.
Silky anteater or pygmy anteater, and we have two of the three species of anteaters right here.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Welcome back to Talk About, ladies and gentlemen. And something interesting happened Friday, and there's some interesting allegations that came out from it, and that is the Salaries Reviews Commission has basically said, hey, let's increase the salaries of certain public officials. This was the backdrop of the 4% pay increase given to public servants, right? Which essentially, and I and all said on this show, listen, that's probably all we could afford right now. And it makes no sense demanding for more because there probably isn't more. And the truth in that statement is in the fact that just about every corner of the public service and government, whether it's a ministry, special purpose company, local government body, they want more money. The police probably want more money. They're not getting it. Gary Griffith himself, when he was commissioner at the time, complained about it with officers having to buy food for police dogs and police horses. The fire service had issues with trucks not being available and not being maintained, and they have to buy new trucks and they don't have the budget for X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 blah. Right? Ministry of Health, Education, EFCL, there are a lot of areas. Look, the government owes money to itself. It owes money to TNTech, as well as, I believe, there are other situations where the government owes money to itself. So I get that. I don't have an issue with the 4% pay increase as much as the people who were subject to it have an issue with it. Of course, the private sector jobs are basically saying, we would love to have any kind of increase, 1%, shucks. But with that said, the SRC has proposed to increase parliamentarian salaries, I believe, although that is a small increase, couple $1,000. But the big increase is coming to the Prime Minister, the President, and the Leader of the Opposition. Now, ironically, or maybe not ironically, the opposition has come out to say, and I believe, let me just double check this here. Well, okay, before I go into that, the unions have more or less said, hey, and this is what you would expect, right? You just had us go into suffer through a 4%, and we've argued, and you've told us, no, we have to take it. Head of the, well, Michael Anna said, I could never remember. One of the union leaders, of course, he more or less has been leading the charge on this because he's head of the whole overall group of unions. Basically questioning, well, pointing out the obvious, really. How does this look? Even for those of us who were not subject to 4%, we're not dealing with that. We don't necessarily have any skin in that game. How does it look for politicians to basically say, we can't afford, we can't afford, we can't afford? And then the commission comes out and says, yeah, but give public officials a raise. And we're not talking about 4% raise. In some cases, I believe it's as high as 30%, somewhere along the lines there. Now, on a practical level, let me just say this here, on a practical level, it's one thing to give one man a 30% raise. It's the next thing to give the entire public service 10%, or 12%, or even 8%. the level of expenditure is not the equivalent. It's not as though the amount of money that is proposed to increase the Prime Minister's salary by, well, if we don't increase his salary, we can afford to pay all the public sector workers another 2%. You know, I mean, it's insignificant when compared to the wider wage bill of the public service. So on a practical level, it isn't that much of an issue. The problem is the optics of it. The optics of it, Mr. Anisette is pointing out the obvious. I, as someone who believed in the government's stance that we don't have enough money to give them more than 4%, because I saw all of the other budgetary shortfalls, this looks horrible to me. Now, that said, it's the commission that is proposing these pay increases. It's not the government saying we're going to institute it, right? And of course, famously, last time the opposition and the majority government were able to do anything together, that was over the last pay increases in 2014, I think it was. But anyway, now opposition member David Lee, I'm trying to pull up the article here, but he has come out and he has communicated his opinion in an interesting way. He has said that he does not expect the government to accept the pay increases. And I believe the opposition leader, the opposition in general, has come out and denounced the thought for the very same reasons that unions are up in arms, and many people, I would imagine, in the population disagree with the whole situation. It sends the wrong message. It looks bad. It makes politicians look very, very disingenuous, right? To accept a pay increase on their behalf now. And the sad part about it is the Prime Minister potentially, I know people are going to disagree with me here, right? I'm not saying this is my opinion. I'm just putting out a train of thought. Potentially, the Prime Minister, his workload does warrant a pay increase, right? But given the times and the circumstances that we're in, I think it's fair to say that politically speaking, it would be a big mess if this went through. But then the question is, let's just say it does. Let's just say it does. Then what? Because we, the people, actually have to do something about it to hold the government into account. We can't just wait for someone else to do it. See, usually, we want the government to do it. Government, fix this. Well, the government is not necessarily going to hold itself into account for things that we disagree that it did. Which is why it goes back to what I said at the top of the show. We are not involved in many aspects of our wider community and the governance of our country. Things like this could happen when we bury our heads in the sand. It hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened yet. But it can happen when we bury our heads in the sand and we don't get involved. And we want somebody else to deal with it. Unfortunately, the opposition is the minority, so at the end of the day, let's not expect them to be able to fix everything. That doesn't make sense. We would still have to proactively put them in government, in the majority position, for them to actually do anything about it. Of course, will they, if positions are reversed? Who knows? Who knows? But let's move on to the next story. And this one I found was interesting. The Chief Secretary, he has essentially walked back from his initial, well, not his initial, but from his complaints that there's a cover-up over the oil spill, right? And he went on to clarify that he doesn't think there was a cover-up, but information was not forthcoming. And again, I think this is a communication snafu, right? It's not that big of a deal, but it shows the inexperience. However, at the end of the day, it's a good sign to see the Chief Secretary be willing to clarify the situation. You know, even if he doesn't use the words walk back, right? Or anything to that extent. Essentially, him having to say anything that's going to reverse his position in any way, no matter how minor, that's a big deal for someone in the public sphere. That's a big deal, because then your critics could potentially use that against you. And kudos to him for basically saying, all right. I was upset, I got, maybe I said something a little too far. It's not the end of the world. It's not like I slandered anybody, right, or anything like that. But kudos, he walked back. Now, the thing about it is, and I went on to say last week, I believe that information is not going to be easy to get on things like this, electronic monitoring, whether radar, satellite imagery of what went on. That's not so easy. Now, maybe there are sleuths who could find it on the internet, but given, it's one thing to find a building doesn't move. Boats move. And the discernible characteristics from a satellite image, that's not so easy. From a radar return, depending, you need to have a transponder, otherwise it's just a blip. So one of the things that the government has brought out, Minister Young has pointed out, and I think this is pertinent, he has said that there are over 350 vessels, this is the Minister of Energy, Stuart Young, 350 vessels named Gulfstream. And it makes sense, right? That, okay, let's trace the name of the vessel to try and find out, okay, who owns it. But when you have 350 vessels, now things get trickier. Now, if you had proper paperwork, ideally it should be easier to trace because there should be some more identifiable paperwork besides just the name of the vessel that you could eventually trace to the owner. But, this is Trinidad and Tobago, the land of pirates of the Caribbean, apparently, where anything goes on our maritime waters, and we barely know anything about it because it's questionable if our Coast Guard actually, guards the coast, much less the sea. But it's a needle in a stack of needles. Now, also coming out of this, I find interesting, the whole cleanup has become an issue for the opposition. And MP Indar Singh, Rudranath Indar Singh, he has accused the government, it is reported, of making illogical remarks, right? Basically saying, I've been hearing pronouncements that the spill has been contained and the spill is being managed. And then he went on to say, well, because the vessel hasn't been plugged, how is the spill contained and is being managed? That defies logic. Well, here's the thing. You contain a spill by containing the spill. Right? They never said that they stopped the spill. They never said that they plugged the leak. They never said that they prevented any more from leaking out. They never said that they just said that they contained the spill. They never said that they stopped the leak from growing. They never said that they stopped the spill from doing anything except essentially effecting further outwards. Yeah, you can't contain a leak. You can't contain a leak without actually blocking the leak and fixing the leak. In fact, usually when you use the word contain in any sort of crisis management situation, that usually implies it's not solved, We've just kept it from getting worse. Hence the term contained. We've contained the situation, we've kept it from getting worse. It's not solved, it's not over. The source has not been dealt with, but we've contained it. So, and maybe this is an argument of semantics, but I just felt if that's your big argument, communication is a significant part of parliamentarians' job. And basic errors like this, which I think is a basic error, does not bode well for the level of our political debate, for our political discourse. But again, if we're not involved in the process, then essentially low expectations can continue. And I'm picking on the MP and Dar saying, but he's not the only one, and it's not on only his side. right? And I'll just leave it there. I'll just leave it there. All right, let's move on to the next story. Try and wrap this up fast. Some housekeeping things, essentially. Quick, there was a police shooting where 3 were reported dead, 1 including a 18-year-old girl, I believe, who is said to be pregnant or was said to be pregnant. Now, I basically have one thing to ask with this, right? Because apparently, one of the deceased was live streaming at the time. To some extent, there's footage that went viral of at least part of the incident. I just have a question, and I'm not saying it's not there. I'm just saying, do we have body camera footage? And then to some extent now, my follow-up question / request is, can we get some of that released to the public? Because again, the reason why we have it is to protect police from accusations, and right now there are accusations with regards to this police shooting, that it's not necessarily on the up and up. So that's all I like to say, especially if you're going into a confrontation like this. And the problem is, when you don't have the body camera footage, the implication, whether rightfully or wrongfully, is that somebody's trying to hide something. And the last story, and I did say that there's some good news, and this is a nice story. A family of 4 got lost hiking up on the northern range near Mount St. Benedict sometime in the afternoon this weekend. I think it was yesterday. And they got lost. They called the 999. Police and fire services responded, and I believe they were able to use an aerial drone to find the family, and then land search and rescue were able to get to the family. It wasn't just the police and fire service involved. I think it was a police drone, fire service, rescue, Hunters Association, and others. This is a nice story. It just shows that, hey, and I believe the family was rescued by 9 p.m. Of course, you had to reach them in the bush, etc., etc. So at the end of the day, it's not outside of the norm for a wilderness rescue to kind of take long. And one could even argue that it could have been faster, but you know what? I'm just happy that we got our services working, I think generally speaking, as intended, in a reasonable time frame, in a reasonable manner, to prevent any sort of tragedy, because the family of 4 included 2 small children. So I'm happy to see this, and this is not something I believe that happens every day, but hey, we were able, our country, our first responders were able to respond to the situation, get the job done. I just thought it was a nice way to end our daily review. A little bit of good news there for our boys in blue and red. Folks, let's take a break. When we come back, of course, we'll have the ambassador in blue, rhetorically speaking, on the hot seat. Stay tuned to talk about on WSN. We'll be right back.
My name is Carl Media. I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm not to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break a balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have 2. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the
not
game.
no.
Let's go to the last part.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God, so we cannot a stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's being the victim,
right,
or the man is being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI. Worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Now you don't need to register nothing. You don't need. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. And we have our media ambassador, whose job these days, I must say, I do not envy. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Sean. and it's nice to be here. Which job are you talking about? Being a media ambassador or being a member of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. You don't want me to answer that. I don't think you want me to answer that.
I think two of them has its challenges at this point.
They have, exactly. Okay.
Point in
time. Now, here, one of the things is, of course, post-Carnival. Things look good Carnival Monday and Tuesday.
It did, in fact, go well for us.
For those 2 days?
For 2 days. There was a lot of officers a lot of effort and emphasis was placed on general public and safety leading up to Carnival. There were a lot of events taking place, so officers was on the ground trying to ensure that everything leading up to Carnival. We had a very relatively safe Juve, which is good, and kudos to the general public for always being, how you should say, law-abiding in the context of Carnival. I mean, they enjoyed themselves, they came out to have a good time, and they did in fact do that. The Carnival Monday and Tuesday, there was no major incidents, right? So that was a positive for us coming into the way that the year started. We were concerned that we would have had some untoward incidences leading up to Carnival and even during the Carnival period. Mm-hmm. But then again, the Trinidad and Tobago, the general public and all the arms of national security and all the stakeholders did in fact play their part and had Carnival 2023 for very safe safe carnival, relatively safe in the context of crime.
Right, that's important to say, relatively safe, because of course, the days around carnival, before and after, it's not as though crime stopped as well. But relatively speaking, we didn't necessarily see an upsurge. Is that appropriate to say?
Yes, that is true. And even with the other activities such as persons going to the beaches, other areas to enjoy themselves, we didn't have any incidents along those lines. So generally, I would say the carnival period was relatively safe, and it was good. It was good. Sometimes we over the years, normally we would say that we hope that carnival is every day. And from a policing perspective, we would hope carnival could be every day. From the policing perspective, means that we are able to bring out additional resources, have more manpower on the ground, more activities. So from a law enforcement perspective,
but that begs the question, right? Because it works both ways. Because there was even, and I think this may or may not have been overblown, but there was even talk about some officers being overworked and maybe having a sick out or not turning up. Now, in hindsight, it's proven to not be the case. We got more or less the presence, I believe, that was asked for. But if you say carnival every day, unfortunately, that would mean, 110% effort, max effort, all boots on the ground every day.
It cannot be sustained holistically. I mean, it's wishful thinking, but it cannot be sustained holistically. But yes, in fact, the officers themselves was in fact being pushed to the limit. We have been going for some time now, and not that we are saying that this is not part of our job, but the amount of different activities, the amount of different situations that came very close to each other, a lot of activities outside of the normal policing, we're talking about events, major national events came in, and we have been continuously trying to treat with those things.
In general, because, I mean, it's big news now with regards to police recruitment, right, ever since the last budget. So I want to ask, generally speaking, I'm not sure if I asked this before, but how long, roughly, would it take for a new recruit to actually now become an effective member of the service? He could add to the manpower in a meaningful way and not just be a filler body that could only do basic things.
Well, it takes 6 months. There's a 6 months process where you go through the entire process of learning the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, understanding the requirements of being a law enforcement officer in Trinidad and Tobago, and after the 6 months, you're on a 2-year probationary period. Right. So 6 months for the go through the academy for the academics, and as well as learning to do survival training, use of weapons, drill, and then after that you have 2 years probationary period on the job outside. So academically, from the academy perspective, 6 months, then you have a 2-year training period.
But the probation would still, to some extent, give the service access to more people to be in the field.
6 months in the academy, and then you're passed.
It's just they're not going to be experienced or seasoned yet.
And unfortunately for this year, they got the trainees that was in the academy got a taste of carnival. Right, so they came out. They came out for carnival Monday and Tuesday. So they get a taste of what is to expect of a police officer who will no longer be able to enjoy carnival just like the average citizen.
There are other jobs. I have worked 2 of them. There are other jobs in the country that basically cause you to have to be excluded from carnival festivities. Not just national security apparatus. So you're not alone. You're not alone. I even had a discussion with some people on shift during carnival.
So yeah, I am in that category, and for my number of years in the service, 20-something plus years in the service, I am no longer able to enjoy carnival from that perspective. I am there to make sure that
but you're still technically able to witness carnival, to be around carnival.
But holding the position,
not necessarily drinking
holding the position of law enforcement, you have a level of responsibility that you cannot release. Just say, okay, well, for Carnival Monday and Tuesday, I'll go forget that and I'll continue going on. No, once you are there on the ground, you have a level of responsibility.
Believe it or not, because I have a very small background, very, very, very small with regards to events and productions. You know, I'm more interested with behind the scenes and actually taking part most of the time. But that's just me. That's just me. But the reason why I brought that up was, again, I think, I can't remember if it was an economist, a political scientist, or a criminologist, but they looked at Carnival and they said, hey, they think there's success here and it might be part of a larger plan. And I wasn't necessarily too sure about any implications like that, because on the basic level I knew that, yes, we do know to some extent putting a lot of manpower, surging manpower on the streets will have some sort of positive effect, right? It could vary, but it will be some sort of positive effect. But we know that the level that it's done during Carnival is not sustainable.
It cannot be sustained because a lot of different areas within the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is shut down.
Right.
Right. Some are actually shut down. Some are.
This is like secondary things, administration side.
Yes,
and
the administration. Certain sections are not non-functional for Carnival because the manpower resource that we require will be coming from many of those sections. Together with we got additional support from other areas, so that we would have gotten some support from the municipal police. From throughout Trinidad and Tobago, we got support from the traffic wardens who assisted the traffic branch. Carnival Monday and Tuesday, you would have seen them on the streets, on the periphery of the Carnival village, I would say, working in tandem with the traffic branch, assisting in policing, traffic management, and they were also in different police districts, right, in different regions, assisting officers outside of Port of Spain. So we would have gotten additional resources in terms of those external stakeholders that lending assistance, right? So generally, it was a safe one. We had some minor infractions. Persons would you always get some persons who would have drink some alcohol. We would have arrested around 39 persons throughout for multiple offences.
I think just before Carnival, there were also a lot of speeding tickets.
Yes.
Given out.
And we implemented the reckon for Carnival, which it in fact worked well. Because we started to send out the message early that reckon will be implemented again. So,
but is there any takeaways? Is any of this going to kind of carry over, like maybe more speed traps or speeding ticket exercises, like reckon?
We come out so as we coming out of the Carnival period, we are going back. We are now in the Lenten period, and we entering the Easter. Easter, you know, is synonymous with a lot of activities by the beaches, the rivers, and we also have some events taking place with different type of events. So it is not that easy for the police officers anymore. At this point in time, we still have to go back. We're going back into more additional resources back on the ground, more additional patrols, more messaging, because these periods, these heightened periods where persons, when they traverse the streets more, going to the beaches, we still had to reinforce the safety tips that we continuously reinforcing throughout the year, right? And those are standard things. Once you're using the roadways, we have to enforce the safety tips.
Because one of the things coming out of Carnival, and it's more or less implied with everything said as a follow-up to relatively how safe it was, is that the population, they were civil, they were cooperative, they did their part, right? Now, to some extent, how much of it is because of that? And the reason why I ask that is moving forward, I think people need to not underestimate that we can't expect 100% of the TTPS to physically be on the streets every shift, right? So I think people underestimate their part to play as well.
That is so important, because even within the Carnival period, I mean, notwithstanding we had a lot of tourists from other areas came for Carnival, but we also had a cruise for Carnival.
Yes.
Right? And those persons would have embarked the cruise ship, going to the Socodrone, as well as go to other areas, venture into Port of Spain. Now, they were not here for the Carnival per se, but they went on a cruise, but they got to enjoy a Carnival in Trinidad and Tobago, part of the package. And it was safe. they were able to get back on their vessel, no incidents with any of those particular type of tourists, because we still have cruise ships taking place. It's still in the cruise ship season. So yes, holistically, if we don't get that support from the general public, all the masqueraders, the band leaders, everybody who's associated with carnival, the vendors on the streets, it makes life much more difficult for police officers and the law enforcement around carnival. But Trinidad and Tobago and carnival is ours. And I think that because it's ours and everybody likes, once they enjoy the atmosphere, they want to enjoy the atmosphere in a safe and secure manner. You want to be able to leave home, come into Port of Spain, enjoy the carnival, observe, just have a nice time for that day, throw caution out into the wind, and just enjoy yourself because of, and release all the stresses that you have, because by Monday, by Ash Wednesday, right, Ash Wednesday, or in some instances, some of our Trinidadians by next Monday, because they are going to work for the rest of the week, right? You want to be able to, and then everything come back to you as to, life continues, bills to pay, this to do, that to do, and it back. So this period is where we Trinidadians, and that's what I'm saying, we are responsible in that context. With all the negatives in and around, carnival itself brings a different dynamics to persons, to give them a different feeling that day, right? And I want to say it's a very positive feeling because we do not have a lot of issues. We did, in fact, to get some pickpocketing and
some robbery,
and people snatching phones and jewelry. But at the end of the day, it's difficult to manage that because when you have persons in the crowd, right, it's easy for somebody to just pick. So it was not as much as the years gone by, right? So it has been, Carnival itself has been a very relatively calm period when it comes to crime and serious crimes, and it's because of the efforts that the police officers put out leading up to Carnival and during Carnival. So it is in fact, it is commendable, and I always say it's commendable to the officers and all the officers who came out and give of their service on those days. Carnival is an extraordinary period for police officers. It is not normal functions that we will be doing. It's extraordinary, right? Because you have thousands of persons on the streets enjoying themselves.
Probably more, but yeah.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands of persons on the streets. Just think about the Arapita Avenue. Everybody is crammed in that area, enjoying themselves under the influence of alcohol, and you do not have major incidents because the average individual, the confrontation and where you would have persons, say on a normal day, the violent nature of an individual is more or less kind of put to the side, because at that point in time, everybody is friends, everybody is family, all of us friends, we enjoy ourselves together. That is what Carnival brings to us.
It's unfortunate that does not extend in any significant way beyond Monday and Tuesday. But I want to take a break. When we come back, of course, we'll open the phone lines. When I hear from you, the viewer, I'm sure some of you may want to put the poor media ambassador on a hotter seat. He will be here to face questions. There's a lot of things that we can't. I just ask all people to be respectful, but you'll have to wait. We'll be back to open the phone lines after this.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Now you don't need to register nothing. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
They believe in different criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
And I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
Let's go to the last part.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN Content Capital.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, now is the time we open up the phone lines. We want to hear from you, the viewer. Call in, have your say. Of course, there's the whole situation with the DCPs. There's the whole situation with the oil spill controversy. Will we ever find out who owns the boat? I don't know, right? There's a lot of other stories coming out. Of course, crime continues. Note that the media ambassador, ASP Ali, he did not say that there was no crime. He did not say that crime was solved. He said relatively speaking, which is fair. And it's unfortunate there's been quite a lot of stories that I personally don't want to have to track each and every one in detail because it's emotionally difficult. I understand that. I understand that's the case for most people. That doesn't mean, though, that we bury our heads in the sand and allowed ourselves to be distracted, which the opposition did point out. The whole situation with the salaries, the Salary Review Commission, potentially could be a distraction given the whole thing with the oil spill and the DCPs and everything else going on. They wave in the hand and say, look at the hand, don't look at the thing that actually matters. Maybe that's what it is, but we have a caller from El Socorro. Good morning, caller, you're on here.
Yes, morning, Sean. Morning to the acting ASP.
Morning, sir.
Sean, you touched upon this salary increases this morning. Salary Review Commission. Now, when the government mentioned that 4% for the public servants, money tight, we ain't have money. But I'm watching now the percentage increases for the 3 top public officials of the country. And I'm seeing, boy, I happy for them. But let me go forward. The Prime Minister, 59,680 to 80,000. That's 34%. The Leader of the Opposition, 29,590 to 47,500. Housing allowance, 12,360. That's almost 60%. Forget the housing allowance. 60%. The President's salary, 64,270. Let me just categorize what I'm saying. Office holders, not the personalities. Office holders. Let me get that straight. $64,270 is $73,920, tax-free. I always wonder why the office holder of the president is tax-free in the country. Not personality, just the office holder. So, Sean, 4% is tight. And we haven't across the board, and of course this is just the 3 top. I'm not talking about members of parliament and president of the Senate and all of that stuff. 34%, 60%, and 15%. And I am still waiting, Mr. Sean, on my pittance of 4% over 6 years. My back pay as a retired secondary school teacher. No time frame. I don't know when I'll get it, but I'm happy for the 3 office holders and the rest of the country in public office. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kola. And they will get back pay. Apparently, this is retroactively being applied into 2020. But the thing is, when you look at the actual figures, you know, we're talking about less than $100,000 a month increase, and that's I'm highballing there, right? Just to ensure that I'm within a range, right? It should be much less, I think, something like 50 or so when you add all 3 together, right? That's a lot less money than giving out 6% to the public servants, right? So, like I said, on a practical level, it's technically fine, but the thing about it is, when politicians want to say, listen, we are here to help you. We are here to help you through the hard times. We stand with you together, one nation, you know, under God or whoever we believe in, on all of that rhetoric. And then it's like, yeah, but you'll take 4%, we'll take 30%. We'll take 60%. We'll take however much percent we want. It kind of undermines all of the beautiful language that's given out with regards to one nation standing together. We all in this together. We'll solve this problem together. We'll survive the fire together. No, we're not really surviving together because some of us surviving better than others. Right? That's what it looks like. That's what it appears. Now again, we haven't necessarily seen the government say what they will do with it. It's from the SRC. But the opposition pointed out, why is this even a thing? You know, to be fair, if I was the government, I would have nipped this in the bud. I wouldn't even let this come public. I would have buried this as well. This is not even up for consideration of maybe being debated. No. This should have never got into the public sphere at all because it sends one of the worst messages. We have Sugar on the Sunny Line. Good morning. Morning.
Bear in mind that at independence, our politicians didn't get salaries. They get allowance. Now they're getting the highest salary. And they're claiming, and they give public servants 4%, saying they don't have money. And the cause why they don't have money is the politicians. I have proven that to you where they have destroyed the tax base, where they don't collect the tax, so the culprit is the one who behind this thing. And look at travel allowance and motor cars and whatnot. The only person in Trinidad who's supposed to get that without condition is the president. Other people are supposed to need a car to carry out your function, not to go to work. These politicians do not need a car to carry out their official function. But not only do they give themselves cars, but when the public servant limit of what a car would buy someone, they have no limit. Right? And this is the cause of all our problems. The politicians we have, the only person who have gained from them since independence is them. The people who have suffered for that. Any question?
No. I might disagree that the politicians are completely to blame for the lack of revenue, but I will agree that they are significantly to blame for the lack of available revenue. I'll agree with that, but that's more semantics than anything. I agree with
No, I tell you, the policy, the official policy, is you must need the car to carry out your official duty. That is the law. You want to look at the traveling regulation, you will see that there. Okay? Bye.
Thank you, Professor. I think, I do wonder to what extent this is because we have MPs who are also ministers. So technically, it's not that it's part of a job, they just have two jobs, and unless your constituency is in or around Parliament or your ministry office, you technically have two responsibilities, two jobs at different physical locations. Mayaro, Tobago, those MPs, when they're in Parliament, they have to do a lot of traveling, one would think.
True.
San Fernando on the line, good morning.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, SB Ali.
Good morning, sir.
You know, Sean, I looked at that. I looked at that list of potential salary increases, recommendations from the Review Commission. And one thing stood out to me. Let me first say, I have no problem with the increases. Seriously, I have no problem with the increases. But except one. And when I saw it, it was because I must admit I did not know the salaries of police officers. And when I looked at the police commissioner's salary, what the police commissioner gets and what they recommend, that was upsetting. To think that the premier law enforcement agency in the country, that everybody gets on too, including myself, I must admit, and to think that that is the salary of the police commissioner, it's ridiculous. The police commissioner, that recommendation should have been 100%, Sean, increase in the police commissioner's salary. Because when you look at the police commissioner's salary, and then you think of, so then what the DCPs make, what the senior superintendents make, what the inspectors make in this society, then you can understand. I'm not saying it right, but then you can understand why there may be an issue in the police service where we talk about rogue officers and that type of thing, because you are leaving room inside there for that to happen. Those salaries in the police, so then then you look at, so then what does the sergeants and the corporals make? I am appalled to think that those are the salaries that, if you look at where the commissioner gets, then you come down the scale and understand what other people in the country make in terms of their jobs. You can't expect somebody coming out of university, if you want to professionalize the police service, so to speak, you can't expect somebody coming out of the service with a degree to want to go into the police service. Those are the things that we have to look at. And I am saying there needs to be a serious review of salaries within the police service, because you can't have these officers making that kind of ridiculous salary and expect what we are expecting from them. Have a good day.
Thank you, caller. I think I understand why you said you have no problem with the salary increase. I think the one I have the least problem with, ironically, is the opposition leader, because if the government pushes that through, nobody in the government benefits from that, in theory, unless they intend to lose the next election because they know they have an unwinnable situation. But I think at the end of the day, what you said there points out, and this is why I actually might disagree with you a little bit about the fact that you don't have an issue with the salary increases. I think teachers and police officers, those are the obvious ones, and one could argue there are other areas of the public service, but those are the obvious ones that are underpaid throughout many societies. Not everywhere and not every part of every country, but I think one could argue those are two areas that are not paid the value of what it means to society, and because of that, we do have to put up with some candidates being not necessarily the best, because that's who we get, right? That's who, right? And then the flip side is we have some very hard, dedicated, devoted workers who essentially we are not rewarding them for what they give to the country. We're just not. And unfortunately, that turns off too many good candidates that could have been, maybe. We do have Pity Valley on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on there.
Good morning, Sean. Hello?
Yeah, morning. You're on there.
Yeah, I want to agree with the Salary Service Committee, but with a but. The only thing the but is, they should give themselves the same 4% that everybody else getting in public service. Our next point is the salary for a police commissioner is ridiculous, $30,000. A prime minister, any prime minister, that ought to be this prime minister. You tell me a prime minister getting $56,000 or $59,000, one or two, I'm not sure, either $56,000 or $59,000. A CEO of WASA or TSTT getting $100 and something thousand a month, and that same prime minister had to oversee TSTT or WASA. A prime minister had to run a country, $50-something thousand a month, Sean. That is ridiculous. So I agree with it that they could give themselves an increase, but the thing is, if they say it have the only money they have to give is 4% for everybody else, that is the problem. They will have to give themselves the 4%. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. That's a brilliant statement. That's a brilliant statement, because it would be a great message if the government took 4%.
And retroactive too? 0.0000.
Yeah, I mean, just to say we take any 4% with you, now look how the nature of the dynamics of the conversation changes. So that's a very good point to make. And yeah, I think my issue is with the increases. I get it. One can argue that the prime minister is underpaid. I think I might have said that earlier on. And again, the dollars and cents to increase one person's salary isn't that hard. But the problem is we also have other people in public service who, like potentially the office of the commissioner of police, let me put it that way, police officers in general, teachers in general, who potentially do deserve more, especially if we want to try to attract better candidates in the long run, and also to ensure that they're not vulnerable to predation. I'll expand on that more after the call from Dabity. Good morning, caller. You're on here.
Hi, morning.
Morning.
Sean, yes, we Ashraf. I want to commend the police for a wonderful job that they did. I mean, we have always done excellent work at carnival time, and I think that the carnival leave should be increased by an additional day. But I want to ask you, ASP, that the standard operating procedures with respect to policemen going on the scene of a report. I saw a clipping where there were like about 3 officers and there was fight like in a village, and the police were trying to intervene, whereby I could not see them intervening in that unless they called for backup, and policemen should not put themselves at risk in that sort of situation, because it was like about almost 40 to 50 people there fighting amongst themselves, and the police was trying to arrest. I want to hear your opinion on that, because from time to time we continuously see policemen are not operating as they're supposed to, and next thing you hear, a policeman die or a civilian get killed, and the policeman would have to take the blame for it. Just want to hear your comments on that, and whether or not you all have been taking any action against it. Sean, wonderful program as usual. Have a pleasant day.
Thank you, caller.
Well, It's a judgment call in certain situations. And if you use the scenario, the officers, the caller has indicated the three police officers as opposed to about a crowd of 40. It all depends on how the crowd is behaving, if the crowd is aggressive, and based on this, the crowd is fighting. But at the same time, sometimes we act in situations and we are chastised for acting in the way that we act.
Right.
We do not act for personal security reasons, and we are chastised for not taking appropriate actions. So it's not a hard and fast rule, it's situational. The officers are trained to do a degree of assessment of the environment, and if they know that they cannot and it is becoming overwhelming for them, the requirement is to call for additional backup. But then again, we may have a situation in the situation is being escalated and become hostile. We do not want additional injuries and probably fatalities taking place there when we could have intervened. So immediately or attempt to intervene. So it is in fact a situational circumstance. There's no clear procedure to say, okay, if the crowd is becoming hostile, do not engage, because we do not know how hostile it can become, or if it is that lives could be lost if we allow it. So yes, there is in fact some challenges with respect to that.
And like you said, it all depends on the details, right? Because you could be chastised, you know, it's unsafe, it's obvious, it could be very obvious it's unsafe for the police to intervene, not just for themselves, but also it might further escalate the violence.
Yes.
So you wait for backup, and then people will complain, well, why did you wait for backup, right? But it also, I think, it's very subjective dealing with confrontations, right? There's no yes or no answer, yes or no question, you know, if this, we do that kind of thing, because there's so many complexities, right? Because you could get a specific angle where if it's just a mob and a mob fighting amongst themselves and it's not organized, maybe 3 officers could slowly but surely incapacitate one, maybe, you know, handcuff, plastic tie, whatever. One by one, you work down the line, right? 3 officers might be able to do it over time without having to wait. The flip side, if it's 2 gangs brawling and 3 officers try to intervene, all of a sudden one of those gangs could turn around and say, hey.
The 2 gangs could turn around again.
Or the 2 gangs, yes, at the same time.
So in situations like that, I understand the caller, yes, the officers have to make a judgment call and assess the situation, because that group of individuals who were fighting among themselves, even though it's villagers fighting among themselves, at the end of the day, they are from that same community. They see the police as the outsider.
Right.
And both of them, those parties could turn against the officers, because we all know that these things could escalate in different ways.
Would it be fair that, you know, part of it, of course, is to what extent the officer is experienced in the community, would have relationship with the community?
So there's a lot of factors to consider in that small situation,
because
you really
could
don't
get
have
a community that has like bad blood with the police, you know, bad interaction, so they don't trust the police. So then you come, I am the authority, and they don't want to listen to you.
You really cannot say that you're going to operate step 1, step 2, step 3. There's a lot of situations. There's a lot of external factors that can be considered at that point in time.
And part of it too is...
But really and truly, I agree with the caller. As a police officer, we put ourselves at a greater risk every time we engage in confrontations, whether it is simple stopping a vehicle on the road to do some road check. That could escalate, and we have history will show that there are, and throughout law enforcement across the world, you realize that officers could lose their life by simple routine stop and search.
Is there always that concern that even though it might not be commonplace here, because it's on the internet, and we kind of osmosis, we absorb, right?
And that is why, and stopping a vehicle where you do not know what is in the vehicle, what the occupants have in the vehicle, what the occupants probably would have done before, or what the occupants was going to do. It's a very, very delicate situation, and it's very risky. So that is why sometimes we are at a red alert, red stage. So you stop the vehicle at a heightened alert until they can understand.
As I'm sure you've seen video. I have seen some horrific videos where, yes, everybody, the public gets up in arms when there's any sort of police shooting, especially if it's perceived that the person was unarmed and didn't do anything wrong. But the flip side is I've seen some videos where the police officer just starts the traffic stop and they get attacked. They get ambushed one time.
So every situation is unique, and yes, in fact, like I said, we talking salaries, the risk associated being a law enforcement. Sometimes you wonder if we are really compensated for what we are doing.
I mean, I already know that private security ain't gonna risk their life to do what the police does, right? Let's just get out of the way. So, and at some point, the question about the police service, and if it's, that's gonna be a hard question we as a society gonna have to face, unfortunately. But like the professor said, we don't have the money to actually rectify the situation. There's no good solution. Hopefully, we could work towards it, but we need people that actually want to do that starting from now. Take the hard, long road ahead. Folks, thank you to all our callers. Thank you, ASP Ali, for joining us.
It's a pleasure, and it's good to be here again.
Yes. It's good to see that you're safe. You got through Carnival safe and
We
sound.
did.
Folks, as my co-host always says, make today a good day. We can do it if we try. And despite all the pessimism, I would like to say on behalf of Ashraf and myself, we still believe in TNT. That's why we're here, right? Fighting a good fight. We still believe in TNT. We hope you do too. We will see you tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
WESN. FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
My name is Carl Media, and I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lips?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
And I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
let's go to the last part.
The the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God. So we kind of have to stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's being the victim, or the man who's being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI. Worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with. You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Nah, you don't need to register nothing. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe in different criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system. A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.